encouragement and a help to them.
Yeah, you're right, man. That's disappointing to hear church leaders telling families, to stop. Now, I suppose I could entertain some ideas where maybe somebody should step in and say, "Hey, you might want to really think about this," and that it's struggling financially incredibly, and then they're just planning on continuing to have more. Maybe that wouldn't be the wisest course of action for them, but telling them it's a problem, maybe stretching it.
Beyond being the future, how does God use children in the now?
I think in a number of ways. He can teach us about himself and his love and his care and his justice, his love mixed with righteous anger and judgment, all kinds of things. As we are faced with situations, as we care for our children, as we teach them, we're forced almost to stop and think about God more and how he cares for us. I think we learn things about our own selves, that we are proud and we are selfish, and we need his grace, we need his wisdom. They can also point out our sin in direct ways that we might not expect or catches us off guard. You talked recently about taking one of your children out for a date, and you did directly ask, what's something Daddy needs to work on, but your daughter was quick to point out, well, Dad, you need to get off the phone some, and so he can also use kids to lead others to Christ. I mean, kids can just be very open. They don't, some of the social pressure, they haven't fully embraced that, and so they're just, out there telling people about Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. So. And I agree so much they can teach us. And yeah, I was humbled in that time again, I do appreciate the reminder. So, but I also think kids can and often should serve. So we do, I mentioned before, we do this Family Service Saturday event at our church where it's an opportunity for kids to serve kids that are in need in the community. And one thing that was really a great joy and I think shows how kids can teach was a family that came that the youngest son really served actively and got excited about it. And they went home and he asked his father if they could support another child through like Compassion International type of thing. We're financially supporting a child, and the child, this youngest son, wanted to be part of it and help write the letters and work to support that. And I mean, that is such a great joy. And I remember the father was telling me this, as he was encouraged but even convicted by it, by his son in that. And I think it's just so awesome to see the heart that kids can and do serve when God calls them to at times. We don't allow opportunities for them sometimes, but I think we should in Christ-honoring ways. And I think ultimately we tend to see children as the future in so many different ways. But we as Christians, we as evangelical Christians do often stress this mentality, we shouldn't waste your life. Don't waste your life, to refer to that great John Piper book. But don't wait.
That sounds like a great book title.
Not wasting your life doesn't just refer to that when you're in your 30s. It can refer to when you're 6. We don't know. I mean, our 6-year-old child, our 10-year-old child might die anytime. And we don't want them to have wasted their lives. And we want to encourage them to live a life that is God-glorifying, that never has to say, I was going to wait to serve you until a later time. Because kids can serve God in mighty ways.
Yeah.
And how do children actually make us better?
They can make us more compassionate and more humble and more tender. I mean, I've found that being a father has made me cry easier. My heartstrings get moved at things more often. Whether it's just when you see some other situation going on, whereas I may have been sad or somewhat moved by it previously, having my own and thinking about someone enduring that, my heart just, I feel I guess a higher level of compassion and being genuine, like kind of weeping with those who weep. I think you learn a great deal about faith and dependence through children. That is just they bring that to you because you see their dependence on you, and they're not bothered by the fact that they have to ask you for help to open something, or and so you see them being humble and just needing help and being okay with that.
Yeah.
But then you, like I mentioned earlier, you learn about your own need to depend on the Lord, and so ultimately that is a gift. Well, it can be very challenging and taxing in the moment. Some instance where you don't know what to do, or the child's disobeying, or having a fit in public. Before you have kids, you're like, my kid's never going to do that. I know what that kid needs here in the store that's pitching a fit in the aisle or something. My kid will never do that. And then you have kids, and the Lord shows you your own need to repent and be humble.
Yeah.
But I think they do make us better, and it makes us better followers of Christ as we learn to depend on Him, because they don't come with manuals, and it takes great wisdom to know how to handle different situations, and children within the same family or have different personalities and different motivations and discouragements and this kind of thing.
Yeah. So I really like what you point out. The only two things I would add is I think they also make us better because they can bring a really God-given joy. Honestly, there's been cases, even recently, where I've seen my children make the decision to do something that serves others and glorifies God without really prompting. And I honestly can think of very, very, very few instances where I've had more joy. Where my life has been lit up more than seeing that kind of thing. And it's just amazing. And it wouldn't have happened if I didn't have kids, if I didn't try to raise up the next generation. But also, and this is in general in society, one of the reasons why people don't have kids until later is they don't want to be responsible. We should be responsible, and children make us responsible. Either they make us responsible, or they make us or they reveal we're unfit parents. But they should make us responsible.
They do make you grow up, for sure. And I think, looking at the larger picture of problems in society, we've got this whole thing called extended adolescence, which is like extending into people's 30s, and you can't play video games in mom's basement as easily, as comfortably if you're tending to a child and responsible for helping to form the child. And so just doesn't mesh well.
Nope, not quite. So the last question I'll ask, what are some of the biggest reasons people avoid children's ministry, Ben? And how are those bad theology?
Well, one, I think, is kids, they just don't really understand very much. I should teach older people kind of where it counts more. Or, it's the minor leagues. It's sort of, well, you just tell them some Bible stories and, give them some animal crackers and some juice or something, and they're good. I think other people think, wow, those kids have so much energy, they're so needy, or I'm just not very good with kids. Yeah. Or a very popular one is, well, I've already done that. When my kids were younger, I served with the kids. Sort of, I paid my time, served my time. I think that undervalues what God highly values, and it sort of connects with the parenting or not wanting to have kids, but my personal comfort and convenience is to be sought over God's glory and the good of others. Now, with that said, there are legitimate reasons not to do it. I don't know that everybody in the church necessarily needs to volunteer for the children's ministry. And so I'm not condemning everybody or assuming that I know everyone's motives that doesn't work with kids. It's just not that simple. But that can often be some of the ideas, the mentality, and then the idea behind it. Sort of, well, it's not good for me, rather than thinking about who the object of who we're serving.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think all those things are really the most prevalent things, and almost all of them are so deeply rooted. I mean, the idea that it's not as important as the adult class, so I'm not going to serve there. Sometimes, especially the theologically minded can avoid this, which is really ironic and unfortunate because it's bad theology. And Jesus got a problem with that, and it's a bad theology of man. It effectively, whether you're trying to or not, you're treating children as lesser humans when the Bible so clearly stands against that mentality, and biblical theology does as well. But I think also then there's, I like you brought up, I don't have patience for the littles. I don't have time. I can't, that's not my game, having patience for that. And I think there's a little more validity in this, but actually I think, and theologically speaking, that's your sin nature. That's your sin problem. It's not your personality. And to some degree, if you feel that way, deal with it and grow, because that's what's good for you, if that's how you feel. You need maybe children's ministry to grow you and shape you, because you've got a sin struggle rather than just a personality difference. And then last one, and I've heard, unfortunately, is that children's ministry is really woman's work. On top of the whole, it's your time. This is for women. And I know of men that treat even watching their own kids as babysitting. But God gave these commands, the disciple children, to men. And the biblical understanding, the right theological understanding of manhood and spiritual leadership in the house is one that's willing to dig down and crawl on the floor with some kiddos.
You're absolutely right. And I didn't even think about that. But yeah, there can be the notion that dealing with the kids is, whether in the home or church or wherever else, that's what women do. I do man stuff like fix things or hunt or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, you got Jesus, you got the Lord of the universe, who's clear. I mean, he was a man. Jesus was not a sissy, sitting there like patting, had the kids on his knee or whatever, bouncing them. I mean, I don't know exactly what it looked like, but that it really does. I think is an affront to God when we have that mentality.
That's right. So. Well, I think this is a good conversation, and I hope that the listeners are blessed by this podcast, and I hope you come to value children even more than you did before, and you're enlightened a little bit in that perspective.
Amen.
Amen. Well, God bless. Good talking with you today, Ben.
Yeah, you too, Ben.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Theological Family Ministry Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please give us a review on iTunes and share the podcast with your friends on social media. All new episodes are available to listen to on Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spreaker, and iTunes. We hope you have a great week, and join us again every first and third Thursday.